Greetings, everyone. It is great for me to be part of this discussion with the Manila Times editorial board. And you may know that Sweden is a small country up in the north, but very successful economically, socially, and politically. I'm the ambassador of Sweden to the Philippines since August this year. My name is Annika Thunborg, and I'm here to reinforce the already great, but increasingly great bilateral relations between Sweden and the Philippines.
The opening of IKEA, everyone was so excited about it. I know that my wife was disappointed it didn't happen last year. She actually even went to decide, oh no, it's not till 2021. But the question is, this is a successful opening, I believe. And I was just wondering if there are any other Swedish business interests in the Philippines that you can share with us.
Yes, well, I think that we can go back to, IKEA started to look at this market in 2013. So, and that is very typical for IKEA, that they, when they decide to enter a new market, and they did the same. I was in Mexico 5 years before coming here, and they actually opened their first store in Mexico as well. They really study the market. They travel the country, they talk to families, they visit the people in their homes to get a sense of what in this case the Filipinos really would like to see from a retail company, and then they roll out their strategy, which is always long term. So what we will see is a rollout of more IKEA department stores in the next number of years. We will see how long that takes, depending on the pandemic and other things, of course. But that is the idea: more department stores in Metro Manila. As you know, this was the world's largest, the IKEA's largest store worldwide. And but also in other cities around the country, including Cebu and Davao, I believe. So that is one continuation that we do see. I think that we need to go back also to 2016. The Swedish embassy reopened at that time. We had been closed here in the Philippines for 8 years, and we did reopen. Due to the growing interest of our private sector, the companies did see opportunities here. Due to the emerging economy, the growing middle class, not the least, and that is of course the decision of IKEA and also of H&M, which is another large Swedish retailer. H&M now has over 40 stores in the Philippines, and that rollout will continue.
This shirt is from H&M, by the way.
Oh, okay, good. Glad to see it.
Just out of coincidence.
And that's of course because they can cater to the growing middle class. It's a larger market here, and what we have seen also since 2016 is the growing interest in the service sector. The call centers, where the Philippines has a very competitive market with a young and English-speaking and population, and of course that also can cater to perhaps Western needs, which is important for Western or for European and Swedish companies. So Transcom is actually our largest company here. They employ over 10,000 people. During the pandemic, they have started to enter into from home services, which they will launch in several other cities. I think it is they will launch it in Davao, I believe, in the winter, which is then a way to because the pandemic has hit the call centers hard. Very large number of employees working in actually beautiful areas. I must say, I visited Transcom here, great work conditions, but we're still talking about a lot of people in the same facilities. So of course, with lockdowns and restrictions, that kind of business has been hit hard. So, but it's also meant that they are actually redefining their mission. I mean, or their work methods. How can they work during the pandemic? Or can they? So that is what we will see, I think, more of. And I think Transcom is a company that will then enter into home office, which is basically quite novel for. It's a novelty for the call center business. So when it comes to of course, another company that has expanded its operations here during the pandemic, and this is, of course, interesting because it has happened during the pandemic, is AstraZeneca. AstraZeneca is, as you know, I mean, it's a Swedish-British pharmaceutical giant.
Yes.
Astra is a Swedish company from 1913. It really dominated the pharmaceutical market for decades. And Seneca is a British company that is much younger, and they merged in 1999 and have created this large company, which is quite large here. I mean, they have 300 employees, and what is interesting is that they have a female CEO, Lotis Ramin, who is a Filipina, and all their staff are Filipino. So that's it also shows the emerging market in terms of the capacity that the Philippines has in terms of its workforce, educated workforce in this case. And this is, of course, what we see much of because most of our companies have sales and marketing offices here. Sweden has, I don't know if you know, I mean, we are not a big country. We have 10 million people, but we are very successful, have become very successful socioeconomically. And we actually have more multinational companies per capita than any other country in the world. And many of these large companies that are industrial manufacturing companies, they are not present here. They are present in terms of sales and marketing, but they're not really present in other ways. And we're talking about companies such as, Volvo Group, which is buses, trucks, maritime equipment.
I drive a Volvo, Ambassador.
Well, the Volvo cars, Volvo cars is slightly different. Volvo cars was part of the same company. Volvo cars today is
you're talking about the commercial equipment.
Yes, the large company is Volvo Group, but Volvo Cars is also an important company in Sweden since it has most of its. It has all the R&D and design there on Volvo cars. Certainly, it's a Swedish car. But anyways, I can list a large number of companies, and some of them do have presence here. Atlas Copco is one, for example. And but anyway, so that is sort of a missing. We don't have that much of manufacturing, and I think that is in general what we have seen, that the Philippines did go from being an agricultural society to being a service economy much more than many other countries have done. And we can also see that from the side of our companies. And therefore, I was very glad to be able to inaugurate just 2 weeks before we inaugurated IKEA, the OSM group that opened a factory in Clark. And the OSM group is, they design or they produce, for example, portfolios, the folders for Kindle and for Amazon, for Google, for Samsung, for many of the digital companies. So they produce much of the high quality design products that the high tech companies, the tech companies, are producing. So they opened a factory in Clark, which today has over 100 employees, and they will have over 300 around in February. So this is, of course, a very promising sign as well, that we did see a manufacturing company opening its doors during the pandemic. When it comes to future plans, I mean, for a long time we have worked with the Department of Transportation on smart mobility and public transportation in the Philippines, and we work closely on the EDSA busway, and also providing technical assistance funds from one of our development assistance agencies to perform technical assistance on to see how you can actually create BRT systems. And
nice.
The EDSA busway is an example of that, but we have it in many other parts of the country, and that is also Swedish companies, engineering and expert companies on engineering and technology are involved in technical assistance work there. So this is certainly where we see large development opportunities also for Swedish companies. We're very big on the mobility sector. Volvo, I mentioned, Scania is another one, and often if it goes together with digitalization and clean energy and so on, there are more companies involved in that, such as the large Swedish company ABB. That is an expert on
brewery. Okay.
Electricity, on electricity and on transmission, so that's an area where we see, which is of course connected to smart cities in general, and
right.
And there are a lot of great examples of smart cities, including where I am here in the BGC. But we know that there are certain aspects need to be complemented, such as smart mobility and public transportation solutions, for example, and also energy solutions. The Philippines being should be a test bed for renewable energy, considering how huge the possibilities, opportunities are in this area. So smart and green and renewable energy is another area where we do believe that there are great opportunities, and this is of course also a priority area of the European Union, and where we work closely with the Philippines, since we have very similar goals when it comes to combating climate change and living up to the goals of the objectives in Agenda 2030 and the Sustainable Development Goals, being close multilateral partners in that area. So that is what I see as possibilities, and where I do hope that we can continue to work in the future.
Well, that's very encouraging, Ambassador. I mean, it seems like the Swedish businessmen are here, but maybe not many Filipinos know about the presence of Swedish investments and businessmen in the country. I was wondering, how is it? Are they happy doing business here? What have you heard? I mean, maybe what can we do? What can the Philippines do to maybe entice more business connections or investments and trade from your country? What have you heard from them?
Yes, well, there of course was a reason why it took some time for many of the European countries, and it's not only Sweden. I mean, Denmark came
yes, around the same time,
a year before, at same time, and Finland came a couple of years later, and now we also have Hungary, Poland, and Ireland more recently. So we see more and more European countries reestablishing themselves here. And so, I mean, the Philippines being the 12th or 13th largest country in the world, with a lot of opportunities in a growing economy. But there are, of course, I mean, there are market access issues that are tricky. It takes a very long time. Permits. so it is not an easy market to do business in, and there of course we do hope that also together with European Union partners move these issues forward. The EU is actually a very big player here if we take the European Union as a whole, and it is our most important platform. And then of course there are issues I mentioned. Why transportation is also an area where we see a lot of possibilities. I mean, in general, infrastructure, I should say, also the airport, new airports, new ports, and because infrastructure has been a challenge. Transportation is difficult. The costs. I mean, our businesses usually say that it costs as much to transport something from Stockholm to from Cebu to Manila as it costs to transport something from Stockholm to Manila. And complicated as well. So I think that these are issues but we also know that the government is looking into these issues. We have seen a lot of progress, and I was very encouraged by the meeting I had with the Secretary of Finance, Carlos Dominguez, also on many of the reforms that they are pushing through, and also of course the projects of the Department of Transportation, and of course the Department of Trade and Industry. So a lot of important reforms have been put in place, and we know also, for example, that the staff of the Department of Finance and also let's see, it's called the Department of Socioeconomic Development.
The DSWD, the Social Welfare Development. Yeah.
Exactly. They also went to Sweden to study the taxation system and so on. So I mean, they do, which is sort of interesting. They do. I understand, travel quite a bit to learn about different key reforms that other countries have undertaken, and to see how things can be improved in these different areas here in the Philippines. So well, if these reforms and programs continue after the elections, we are would of course be very pleased with that development.
Right. I'm just wondering if the Swedish people are similarly unaware about the Philippines as we are about the Swedish presence in the Philippines, and the question has to do with how my European friends, when they think of Asia, of course China comes to mind, but when they think about Southeast Asia, Thailand is top of mind because of tourism, I suppose, and of course Singapore draws a lot of attention. I was just wondering where the Philippines fits into the Swedish mindset, maybe both in the general public, and maybe also you can talk about in terms of foreign policy, where does the Philippines fit in?
Yes, well, as we know, in most countries, for most people, the foreign policy is not so high on the agenda most of the time. But I can get back to that. But I think that the Philippines is actually is a very popular tourist destination also for Swedes. I mean, Thailand has been the top destination for decades for the Swedes, and we also there are direct flights between Sweden and Thailand, but you do have to change planes to go to the Philippines, but it is a very important, very popular destination due to its beautiful nature, its archipelago, the biodiversity, the pristine nature, and so on. And we do have not a large Swedish community here, but we have around 1,000 Swedes who have settled here, also retired here.
Oh.
And this could, of course, I know that this is also a priority of the Philippine embassy in Stockholm to promote the Philippines further as a tourist destination. I mean, the Philippine embassy reopened in Stockholm last year in 2020. They also cover Finland. So my colleague, their ambassador Maria Lumeni-Sletaka, she covers both Sweden and Finland, and I know that is one of her priority issues, which is smart cities is another one. If we just revert back to the trade part to look at that, but I think, I mean, the Philippines is quite popular. Of course, I agree with you that the knowledge is not it is not in-depth knowledge, but right. In terms of actually thinking about it as a tropical paradise, yes, that is definitely there for the man on the street, for the people in general. And well, when it comes to foreign policy, well, that of course will be more perhaps we who are experts and who work in the area. I mean, where the Philippines traditionally and historically have been seen as a very important partner in the United Nations, a strong multilateral commitment. And I have worked myself a lot in the United Nations and have always worked with the Philippines. And the Philippines has also held different positions of chairpersons and so on in different international negotiations. There, I believe among the experts, that is the view of the Philippines as a strong, with a strong commitment to multilateralism and an important player on the international stage. Yes, so that I believe is in brief.
Okay. Yeah, I was just talking also to our new consul general in Germany, in Frankfurt, and she was saying that Germany, for instance, is paying more attention now to Indo-Pacific, as is of course other countries. I was wondering if Sweden is the same way, that more attention is being drawn now to this part of the world, and I was wondering if that is driven by economic opportunities or other concerns such as security concerns, or combination of both. I mean, what's being talked about in foreign policy circles in your country?
Yes, I do believe that in recent years, also, for example, the Swedish Parliament and the parliamentarians have paid more and more attention to the situation in the South China Sea or the West Philippine Sea, the situation overall here, and follow it more closely. I think we did see that from one year to another, probably between 2019 to 2020, we saw that the number of questions in the Swedish Parliament increased from, I believe, 15 to 75 or something like that. So,
on much more curiosity.
So in terms of actually following the international news, being having knowledge about that and wanting to know more, that we definitely can see, which has to do with the geostrategic and the security policy situation in this particular region, and the role of superpowers in this region. We, of course, coming from Northern Europe, are well aware of situations where you do have an involvement of global superpowers and the important security policy. So here there is a recognition in terms of what we can see. And also a concern, also coming from a region, the Nordic region, which has really tried to keep peace and stability in the region through a balance of interests and to balancing the interests of the different global powers. At the same time, asserting the extreme importance of autonomy and independence. So I think that there are certain similarities here that also those that are interested in these issues see. And then talking about the ASEAN region is of course also something that is of great importance. I mentioned the European Union as the most important foreign policy platform of my country, and I mean we have been very successful after. Since the foundation of the European Union, and some of us joined later after the end of the Cold War, which also had to do with security policy concerns in our part of the world, balance different interests. But what we have seen is that the European Union has really created peace and stability in Europe. We have maintained peace and stability because of the European Union, because of the very high degree of economic integration and socioeconomic cultural interactions and interdependencies that we do have among our nations in the European Union, and of course that we have based our structures on the rule of law and how strong the strong role legislation has played. I mean, we're talking about international rule of law, we're talking about regional legislation that we have in the European Union, and we're talking about national implementation, national legislation that is then compatible with the rule of law at the other level. So this has created a very strong union, and we have also been very successful, of course, economically, but also politically in terms of maintaining peace and stability in our region and basically changing the situation. I mean, what historically we didn't used to have that kind of cooperation. So I believe that looking at ASEAN, that is another region which is very important. Important to us. We do believe, and of course, the European Union is a great supporter of further integration of the ASEAN countries and within the ASEAN region, because we do believe that does lead to prosperity and peace and stability. And it's also important for the European Union to forge closer ties with the ASEAN region. And I saw that one of the questions said that that there has been that the Philippines has lost more its ties to Europe. I believe I would read that as sort of in the last 100 years or so.
Yes, in the last 100 years. Yes, absolutely.
I'm not sure I would agree with that, because I mean the EU is ASEAN's second largest trade partner, with 13% share of ASEAN's total trade in the world, and ASEAN is the EU's third largest partner outside Europe.
My colleague Kiko wants to ask a question. So I think he covers defense, so he'll ask a defense-related question. Kiko, go ahead.
Good morning, ma'am. Ambassador, good morning.
Good morning.
Yeah, you did mention about the South China Sea, the security and peace and stability between ASEAN and European Unions. It is properly and well documented with regards to the issue of the South China Sea between Chinese and the Philippines. But what I'm getting about is there had been talks about defense cooperations between Sweden and the Philippines, and I believe that the Philippine military was actually considering buying multi-role fighter planes from Saab. Can you give us an update on this? Do you have any updates on this, Madam Ambassador?
Yes, that is an issue I cannot comment on. I mean, when it comes to specific business deals and particularly in this particular field, I cannot comment on that. So I saw your question, but that is not an area in which I can enter.
Is it still alive? I mean, there's still talks going on. Is that safe for you to say that talks are still continuing?
Or negotiations?
Or no comment at all?
I cannot comment on that. No.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that.
This is okay. Ambassador, how about this? What kind of cooperation or collaboration is happening between Sweden and the Philippines on combating transnational crimes or terrorism?
We are a very important donor to the United Nations. We are actually usually in many organizations we are one of the largest or the largest per capita donor, and we are very large on core funding, which means that the organizations themselves can decide where they best put their money, their funds. And then of course we are a big funder through the European Union, and so it's both multilateral and regional and funding through the European Union. And what stands out is our large involvement in peace building in the BARM, and that is a little bit our perspective. Usually, I mean, we are very much focused on addressing the root causes of conflict, and we are involved in peace building and institution building, usually after a peace agreement, which we do fortunately have in the BARM and in Mindanao. So
is that more capacity building, Ambassador, in BARM? Is that what your projects are focused on? Capacity building? Yeah.
Our focus is our funds go to absolutely everything, because I mean, I think you have more than 25, maybe 25, 30 UN organizations present in the Philippines. That's a very large presence, and of course they are involved in both development assistance and emergency assistance, humanitarian assistance, because of the how prone the Philippines is to natural disasters, and we are actually Sweden. We are one of the 5 top donors in the world in nominal terms to disaster mitigation and humanitarian assistance. So it means that every UN organization that is present here in the Philippines, I believe every one of them, there could be a couple of exceptions, do get a substantial part of their funding from Sweden through our bilateral or our development assistance programs to multilateral organizations. And we are also a very big funder of the ICRC, for example, which of course is very much involved in institution and peace building in the BARM as well. We also fund specific projects. For example, we fund a project that UNDP is heading on women, peace and security. That is something we have we specialize on that in many conflict areas of the world. We funded similar projects in Colombia, in Somalia, Sudan, Yemen, Myanmar, Afghanistan, which has to do with, and now we do the same in Mindanao, which has to do with including women as integral part of the peace building process. I mean, our view is that all actors have to be involved in peace building, otherwise the peace will fail, and that includes. I mean, women are usually usually victims, because they are often more victims than combatants. Not always, but they usually are. Civilians together with children, and that means that their perspectives and needs are then different. It's important not only to include combatants in peace negotiations, but also civilians, and with a particular women perspective that women have from their experiences. So that these are, for example, projects that we are focused on all over the world. And also in terms of, for example, creating networks of women peace mediators and so on in different global conflicts. So what I would say is that we are to a large extent focused on, and so is the European Union, of course. Half of the development assistance budget of the European Union devoted to the Philippines is devoted to peace building in the in the BARM, meaning institution building. I mean, everything needs the rule of law, everything needs to be built up from the beginning. And the other half of the EU development assistance budget is focused on circular economy and environmental issues, which of course also is another completely different area, but that's still important. So that I can say that we are not having particular specific figures on related to the question asked, but that we are, as always, focused on the root causes.
Just one follow-up question. You did mention institution building. Can you clarify on that? Is that something like creating more school buildings, road projects? What's that specifically?
It's more making sure that the government can actually function as a government. It's good governance. It's rule of law. It is basically to build up all the institutions that a government needs. So it has more to do with capacity building and an actual transfer of knowledge, and to making sure that the people themselves can take charge of their future. When it comes to humanitarian assistance, I believe the work that the United Nations and the UN organizations do in the Philippines in general is very interesting. We do know that the Department of National Defense has improved its capacity a lot in terms of evacuation efforts, but there is still, in terms of what the UN is working on, is preventive work. How do you prevent the number of casualties? How do you make sure that fishing boats and other equipment is saved before a typhoon hits, for example, and then of course the rebuilding efforts, repatriation, rebuilding, where it also has to do with building more resilient communities or independent autonomous communities and so on. So there you do have the actual process, but I mean the development assistance that you had in the past in terms of building roads and so on, that is really up to a government to do. I mean, the development assistance of the past has to a large extent shown that if other countries come in and do that kind of work, it is not going to be sustainable. But of course, there is a lot of financing available for those kinds of projects, also through the ADB, through the World Bank, and with also climate smart projects and so on.
Ben, you have a question to ask?
Yes, sir. Good morning, Ambassador. I saw this interesting innovation on energy in your country, and it's called solar project, smart solar project, or prosumer project. That's been transforming household or consumers as producers of clean energy in your country. My question is, are these privately initiated? Or if not, what sort of government support has been set in motion to make this happen?
Yes, I would be happy to send you. I gave a climate lecture to the students of the young diplomats in the Foreign Service in the department at the Department of Foreign Affairs.
Here in Manila?
Yes, here in Manila, and
wow,
Secretary Locsin also. Secretary Locsin also participated there, and I would be happy to send that, because then I basically laid out all the different initiatives and how we work on moving from which we were in 1973. Sweden was we were dependent on fossil fuels. The oil crisis came. We had to move away from oil dependency, or both for economic and for environmental reasons, with the pollution we had in the cities at that time. And we moved into nuclear and renewables. And today, 56% of our energy consumption comes from renewables, and only 15% comes from fossil fuel. And around 35% comes from nuclear still, but it's going down. And our goal is to be completely fossil-free by 2030. And when it comes to all the different sources of renewable energy that we have, I mean, they are private initiatives. But what is very typical for our model is the public-private partnerships, which you have a lot of here as well. And it's important for the government. I mean, it's the legislation, and we were the first country that introduced the carbon tax in 1991, and at the same time you have economic incentives and for moving into renewables, so that you regulate. This is typical, what the Ministry of Finance does all the time. I mean, they use these different instruments and tools, taxes and economic incentives to regulate the market, and legislation, of course. But incentives have been very important. And what we do see, the one thing that we have a very innovative industry. That's why we have been so successful. We usually, together with Switzerland and I believe Singapore as well, Israel, we're a couple of countries that always are at leading the top, all the rankings on innovation. And we also invest a lot in innovation, and we invest 3.6% in R&D, from 3.6% of our GDP in R&D, for example, and that is both public and private. It is 1% public and 2.6% private, so this has been very important. But then also the collaboration with the academic sector. We usually talk about the quadruple helix model. That has been very successful for us. The close cooperation between the private sector and academia, the science parks that surround universities, and then the support of the public sector. Often could be credits, could be loans, could be incentives of different kinds. Also investments, but the private sector always carries the biggest part. And then the involvement of civil society, very important, to make sure that the people are on board, that they like what we are doing, so that you don't get demonstrations and opposition and so on. So that the quadruple helix model has been very important to really create a lot of innovation and successful projects. So coming back to your question about solar, yes, that works in the same way. I don't know the particular about how the solar industry actually works, but it's based on these different elements. Basically, everything we do is.
You mentioned a while ago about your Swedish engineers' participation in our mobility projects. Are there other mobility projects such as bus rapid transport in the offing in other parts of our country?
Yes, there are a number of BRT projects. I don't have the exact places now, but there are actually a very large number of BRT projects being pursued all over the country, which is a very encouraging development. And we do have, for example, our large company Volvo Buses, which is their exclusive provider here in the Philippines is Auto Delta. They are involved in a large number of projects throughout the country, including with the public and private, in the public and private partnerships. So this, of course, this is a very encouraging development, certainly, that will help the Philippines a lot. Maybe I should say something. I realized that was something I thought it was something I forgot, but to talk about yes, we have the 75th anniversary is coming up between the 75th anniversary of the diplomatic relations between Sweden and the Philippines. That will be celebrated next year and throughout the year. And we work closely with the Philippine Embassy in Sweden on this project. It will be a social media campaign, but also everything we do in terms of trade promotion and other projects will of course be included in the 75th anniversary. So we look forward to celebrate that and congratulate everyone in advance on this.
Wow. Yeah, maybe we can do another roundtable later on when there are, maybe before some milestone events. Let us know if you're open to doing something like this again, then maybe we can help you promote it.
Absolutely. I would be pleased to do so.
Okay. Thank you, Ambassador. Thank you very much.